Good evening. Welcome to Markets Today. I'm Lata Venkatesh and with me is Surabhi Upadhyay. It was pouring in Mumbai all of today, but it poured good wishes and bullish sentiment on the stock markets as well for the 6th consecutive day. And of each and every trading day this week, the Nifty ended higher and wraps up this week with a 3.5 percentage point in terms of gains. Compare it with the Shanghai, which wrapped up this week with a 13% cut. Some Indian outperformance.
Absolutely. Perhaps, Ata, we can say the rain's bringing green shoots on Dalal Street.
Oh, yes.
I know I'm really talking cliche here.
No, excellent metaphors.
All right, okay. Let's quickly run you through the headlines. A steady end to a good week on Dalal Street. Benchmark indices end higher for the sixth day running, with the Nifty gaining 0.7%, closing above 8,200. The Sensex puts on 200 points. Oil and gas, auto and bank stocks see goodbye.
The mid-cap index moves in step with frontliners, gaining 0.6%. Sun TV surges 8% as Attorney General of India disagrees with the Home Ministry on denial of security clearance to the Sun network. Nitesh Estates, Monitor Ispat and Escorts saw strong buying. Premier Explosives exploded with a rally of 11% after getting an industrial license for manufacturing defense equipment.
The Finance Ministry engineered a rally in bonds and the rupee, with sources saying that RBI wants to convert the $30 billion limit on FII investment in government bonds into a rupee limit. Sensing this will permit more FII investment in government bonds, dealers drove up rupee and bonds to 3-week highs.
Well, those were some of the headlines that dominated Mindspace on Dalal Street. Here are the experts that we have lined up for you on Markets Today. Pratik Gupta, head of equities at Deutsche Bank India, will join in with his take on where markets and earnings are headed. Ruchi Sharma of Morgan Stanley joins in from New York to tell us why he still believes a lot needs to be done on the reform front. But Mukesh Aghi of USIBC says he still believes in the India story. And on the corporate radar, we have Kishore Bayani of Future Group with his outlook for the company after a major rejig. All that coming away in the next half hour. But first up, Surabhi, the markets.
All right, let's quickly run through today's performance then. Well, we saw good gains continue on Dalal Street. In fact, we saw the benchmark indices put up around 0.7% and a 200-point rally going on the Sensex as well. Mid-caps performed almost in step with frontliners, so you couldn't really complain. Fairly well-rounded day. Sonia has all the details.
Oh, yes, it is. And what a great week it's been. You know, the Nifty and the Sensex are up 3% this week. Honestly, at the start of the week, if anyone would have said that the week would end with the Nifty conquering 8,200, no one would have believed it. 6 straight days of gains. And in fact, we've seen some genuine buying in heavyweights. Look at Reliance Industries. It's gained 12% this week. So have a whole host of other stocks like Tata Motors, etc. The Bank Nifty surged in late trade today. And that actually, caused further incremental gains on the index. So we did see a couple of positive cues. One, of course, the monsoon fears have now subsided because of the torrential downpour in Mumbai. So that aided a lot of rural linked stocks, the likes of M&M, etc. And then you saw big underperformance from China that aided our markets today as well. But let's take a look at the gainers today. A lot of blue chip buying, like I mentioned. So names like HDFC, Reliance Industries, Bharti Airtel, ITC, all gaining about 1 to 4 odd percent. And then you had banks. Now banks have come out of the woodwork and are starting to participate a little bit. Today you had Bank of Baroda, PNB, Kotak Mahindra Bank and HDFC Bank that did quite well. And from the auto space, like I mentioned, a lot of companies that have an exposure to the rural markets saw a bit of a relief rally now that the monsoons have picked up. So M&M and Hero MotoCorp along with Maruti Suzuki did quite well. On the losing end, you had a sell-off in Tata Motors today. Tata Power and Sun Pharma too didn't look very good. So those are a couple of stocks that closed in the red. But look at the mid-cap gainers. Escorts, it sells tractors. So because of the improvement in the rainfall, Escorts did quite well, 8% higher. Sun TV had a relief rally today. And a lot of NBFCs that have an exposure to the rural market like M&M Finance, Bajaj Finance did quite well. All those stocks up about 5 to 6 odd percent. And Amtech Auto too up about 6.5 odd percent. So yes, there was a rainfall cheer on the Lal Street, and we had a great end to a very solid week.
Yes, point taken, Sonia, and it was definitely a great Friday and a great end to a fairly encouraging week. Just to add to Sonia's list of rural demand kind of stocks and generally stocks that have been on investors' radar, something they always wanted to buy. There was Century Ply rising 7.8%, and we'll tell you why later on in the day. Marico, another rural-oriented stock. Raw materials come from rural areas. A lot of buying. 50% of the market is in the rural areas. That rose 4%. TVS Motors, long known for the rural part of the demand, up 3.3%. I'm just adding to Sonia's list. Then there was the REC type of stocks and even a little bit of banking stocks like PNB, which have lent to companies like the Uttar Pradesh SEB and the Delhi electricity boards. All of them finding that these electricity companies are raising their tariffs. Yesterday you heard from Uttar Pradesh late evening, saw a bit of a bump up. But the late rally on banks, I would advise that you shouldn't take that very seriously. There was an engineered rally in bonds. I'll tell you that later. That was because of a finance ministry leak that perhaps the amount of bond buying by FIIs will be increased. The limit will be increased. When bond prices rise, banks have so much of bonds in their portfolio. There is a bump up in bank prices as well. But problems with the banking stocks remain. This is very much a technical rally, the bond-driven rally that we saw in the bank Nifty. And in the end, it turned out to be one of the best performers of the day. The index was up 0.83%.
Absolutely. So banks supporting the market and how. All right. On that note, let's quickly get our first market voice going. Pratik Gupta, head of equities at Deutsche Bank India, says that the India story remains intact despite the downward revision in their Sensex growth target.
Index target trimming, which was 33,000 earlier, now 31,000 for the Sensex. That is actually not driven so much by the foreign inflows. Rather, it's been cut because of a lower earnings estimate for this financial year. So this is more driven by the earnings reductions rather than our expectations on flows. On the contrary, I think we continue to believe that India will remain a relative disproportionate beneficiary of global EM flows. The India story is still very much alive. There is still a lot of interest in India, but there is a reset of expectations that we're going through as far as earnings are concerned. And because of that, we have actually reduced our Sensex target. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that we still remain very constructive, very bullish on India. Even our index target of 31,000 implies roughly about a 14-15% upside from here. So that is actually quite a positive outlook on India. As far as infrastructure is concerned, we are actually bullish. That is one of our top overweights in the market. In fact, much more than financials, where we've actually trimmed our weighting on financials to some extent. Infrastructure is our biggest weight. And the way to play it is through certain select capital goods companies in particular, and cement, for example. We have a neutral view on telecoms right now, and the main reason is there's frankly just one or two companies over there which we are recommending. The focus really, as you rightly said, there is a big competitor coming in. That competitor's launch is, from what we understand, is still 3 to 6 months away, and maybe it's a year away from having any meaningful impact, and perhaps 3 years away from having any meaningful financial impact on the earnings of the large incumbents.
All right, that was an optimistic note anyways, although with caveats. Let's now talk about specific stocks. Sun TV rallied nearly 8% in trade today after the Attorney General of India slammed the Home Ministry's decision, or rather proposal, to deny security clearance to the Sun network channels. The government is now divided over the Home Ministry refusing to grant security clearance for Sun TV and the IMB Ministry and the Attorney General opining the exact opposite. Let's hear out what Sun TV's management had to say.
I didn't think that there was any basis to deny security clearance previously given, because the matters that are cited are still before various adjudicating authorities. Said with great respect to the Home Ministry, I didn't think that there was any basis to revoke the security clearance. And now that I've seen this news on TV that the Attorney General has given his opinion on those lines, I'm extremely grateful that we continue to be in business. It was business as usual, because although this news did come out, we didn't hear anything from any ministry. There was no written communication or verbal. So business continued the way it was being done. So there's absolutely no impact on day-to-day operations.
Okay, that's the word from Sun TV. The stock roaring in trade today. Let's move on. It's a first for the Indian government. The oil marketing companies have already been informed about the subsidy sharing mechanism before the end of the quarter. The subsidy sharing mechanism will be following the same formula followed in the fourth quarter of last fiscal, and all upstream companies have been exempted from any subsidy burden till crude prices remain below $60 a barrel. ONGC will have to pay 85% of the additional burden once crude prices cross the $60 barrel mark. The government has done this hoping to push the divestment drive forward. IOC's stake sale could happen once the first quarter results are announced, and the roadshows are likely to kick off from August.
Well, on to the CNBC TV exclusive. We learned from sources that Indiabulls Real Estate Fund is looking to raise $250 million in the next 6 months. Ritu Singh, who broke the story, is joining us with the details. Ritu.
Well, Indiabulls is betting really big on the real estate space. If you remember, its asset management company had floated a real estate fund, and now we're given to understand from sources that that fund is looking to raise about $250 million, and it will raise that money in the next 6 months. Of course, it also has a domestic arm, which is looking to raise about 500 crore rupees, out of which 400 crore rupees we understand has already been raised. You remember the fund even recently made a very high-end investment into a project in Gurgaon, which is worth about 100 crore rupees. Now, all the transactions there, all the investments done by this fund will be in the debt, structured debt space. We're also given to understand that the returns that these funds will have is in the range of 15 to 20%, so very high-end returns there. And all of this fundraising, if you know, is part of the company's plan to create a billion-dollar platform, which will invest primarily in high-end residential projects as well as some infrastructure projects. The mix will, of course, be decided on a case-to-case basis. So there you have Indiabulls betting really big on the real estate space at a time when most PE funds and private equity players have burnt their fingers investing into these sectors.
Okay, all right, Ritu, thanks for getting us that update. On that note, let's move on. Despite the recent spate of volatility in the markets, the one sector that has continued to witness strong demand is the home improvement space. In fact, the Century Ply stock went up nearly 8% today after the management told CNBC TV 18 that they will maintain their double-digit growth guidance.
I think the growth will be within single digit. The second quarter, because I need to look at what growths were there in the last Q1 and Q2 and Q3 this last year. So if I compare, I find that there was a huge growth in the Q1 in last year. So really to get a double-digit growth in last year Q1 will be very, very difficult. Q2, yes, we should be touching double-digit, may remain in single digit.
Well, that's a stock for sore eyes. Rose by 10 times in 2014 from 23 rupees to 240 rupees. Receded a bit to, I think, 180. But look, one interview, what it's done. That confidence that the stock management could restore to investors. People are just hungry for stocks like this. Century Ply today rose by 8% after that interview. Well, on that note, let's get in another expert voice on India. Mukesh Aghi, the president of US IBC, the US India Business Council, says that India is the only shining star among all global economies. That's pleasant to hear.
If you look at the India story, seems to be shining more and more. If you look at the real facts, what you have is the inflation in India has come down. You look at the fact of the deficit has come down. We are seeing a much more aggressive growth coming from India. So that's the only shining star in the global economy. So I think the investors are buying the story. I think you have to have a more predictability on the policy side. I think you have to have the GST passed. You need to have the, if you want to make in India to move forward, the labor reform, the land bill needs to be passed. So I think those are the big ticket items which I think the investors are waiting to see. What we conveyed to the finance minister was that keep on the same track, accelerate the process itself, and the US IBC members are keen to invest, and we are supporting his initiative.
All right, on that note, time for a break, but coming up on the other side, some expert opinion from Ruchir Sharma of Morgan Stanley, who says India simply cannot afford to be complacent. And of course, we'll also tell you about all the stocks that were in news today.
Four years ago, Sabero Organics was acquired by the Murugappa Group. Last month, the executive chairman of the Murugappa Group was charged with insider trading. Find out why on The Firm this week. At these times, only on CNBC TV 18.